The banging on the door was so loud that Elena Hart dropped the plate she was drying, and it shattered across the kitchen floor. She did not move to pick up the pieces. Her whole body had gone still, the way a rabbit freezes when it hears a hawk overhead. Her father, Edward Hart, was already standing, his face drained of color, his hands shaking as he reached for the door. "Stay in the kitchen," he told her, but his voice cracked in the middle of the sentence, and that crack told Elena everything she needed to know. Something was very wrong. 3 men stood outside in the cold evening air. They did not wear uniforms, but they carried themselves like men who were used to being obeyed. The one in front was tall, with a scar that ran from his ear to his jaw, and he did not wait to be invited in. He pushed past Edward Hart, as if the house already belonged to him. "You had until tonight," the man said. His voice was flat, almost bored, which somehow made it more frightening than shouting would have been. "I need more time, please. Just a few more weeks." The man laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Weeks. You have been saying weeks for 6 months, Edward. The Ashcroft Pact does not deal in weeks. We deal in numbers, and your number is very, very large." Elena stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, listening to every word, though she barely understood what any of it meant. She knew her father's business had been struggling. She knew there had been late-night phone calls, papers spread across the table, her father's head in his hands. But she had never imagined it was this serious. She had never imagined men like this standing in their living room. "I have something," Edward said suddenly, and his voice changed. It became quieter, almost pleading. "I have something valuable, something worth far more than the debt." The scarred man tilted his head, curious now. "I am listening." Edward turned, and for one terrible moment, his eyes met Elena's across the room. She saw something in his face she had never seen before, a kind of desperate calculation, as if he were weighing her like an object on a scale. She felt her stomach drop before he even said the words. "My daughter," Edward said. "She is young, healthy, and unmarried. The Ashcroft Pact has taken debts in this form before. I know they have." The room went silent. Elena felt the blood leave her face. She wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but her legs would not move. It was as if the floor had opened beneath her, and she was falling, without actually falling at all. "No," she whispered, but no one in the room seemed to hear her, or if they did, no one cared. The scarred man studied her for a long moment, the way someone studies an item at an auction, and then he smiled. It was not a kind smile. "That," he said, "might actually settle things. The Alpha King has been unmarried for a long time. Perhaps he will find some use for her." Elena's mind raced through everything she had ever heard about the Ashcroft Pact, and none of it was comforting. They were the most powerful wolf pack in the entire Northern Territory, ruled by a man everyone simply called the Alpha King. People spoke his name in hushed voices, the way they spoke about storms and diseases, things that could destroy you without warning. She had never seen him. She had never wanted to. "Father," Elena said, finding her voice at last, though it trembled with every word. "Please, you cannot do this." Edward would not look at her. He kept his eyes on the scarred man, as if looking at his daughter would break whatever resolve he had left. "It is the only way," he said quietly. "If I do not pay, they will take everything. The house, the business, and eventually, they will take me. At least this way, you will be safe. At least this way, you will live somewhere with walls and food and protection." "Protection," Elena repeated bitterly. "You are handing me over to strangers and calling it protection." "It is decided," the scarred man said, cutting off any further argument. He pulled a folded paper from his coat and set it on the table, along with a pen. "Sign here, Edward. The debt will be cleared the moment she crosses into Ashcroft territory." Elena watched her father's hand hover over the paper. For one small, foolish moment, she believed he might refuse, might tear the paper in half and tell these men to leave his house. Instead, his hand steadied, and he signed his name. The sound of the pen scratching against paper was the loudest thing Elena had ever heard in her life. "You will be collected tomorrow morning," the scarred man said, folding the paper back into his coat. "Have her ready. The Alpha King does not like to wait." After the men left, the house fell into a silence so heavy It felt like a physical weight pressing down on Elena's chest. She stood in the kitchen for a long time, staring at the broken plate still scattered across the floor, unable to bring herself to clean it up. It seemed pointless now. Everything seemed pointless. Her father finally came to find her, his face pale and lined with something that might have been shame, though Elena was too angry to feel any sympathy for him. "Elena," he began. "Don't," she said. "Don't try to explain this to me." "I had no choice." "You had a choice," she said, her voice rising for the first time. "You chose to gamble away everything we had. You chose to borrow from people you knew were dangerous, and now you are choosing to trade me away, like I am a piece of furniture you no longer want." Edward flinched, but he did not argue with her, perhaps because there was nothing to argue. Every word she said was true, and they both knew it. "Your mother," he started, but stopped himself. Elena's head snapped up at the mention of her mother. It was a subject that had always been forbidden in their house, a locked door neither of them ever tried to open. Her mother had disappeared when Elena was only 3 years old, and her father had never spoken about it, not once, not in 18 years. Whenever Elena had asked as a child, he would simply say that her mother was gone and that some things were better left buried. "What about her?" Elena asked now, her voice sharp. Edward shook his head, looking suddenly very tired, very old. "It does not matter anymore. Get some rest, Elena. Tomorrow will be a long day." He left the kitchen without another word, and Elena stood alone in the wreckage of her old life, staring at the broken plate on the floor, wondering what exactly her father was not telling her. That night, Elena did not sleep. She sat by her window, looking out at the dark hills that surrounded their small town, wondering what waited for her beyond them. She had heard stories about the Ashcroft territory her whole life, stories parents told their children to keep them from wandering too far from home. It was said to be a place of stone castles and endless forests, ruled by wolves, who could tear a man apart without blinking. It was said that the Alpha King had eyes that could see straight through a person, straight down to their bones. She did not believe every story, of course. Stories grew taller with every telling, the way shadows grew longer as the sun went down, but she believed enough of them to be afraid. She thought about running. She actually stood at one point, her hand on the window latch, staring out at the dark road that led away from town. But where would she go? She had no money, no family beyond her father, no one who could hide her from a pack as powerful as the Ashcrofts. And if she ran, what would happen to her father? The debt would still be there, waiting, and there would be no one left to pay it. So she sat back down, and she waited for the sun to rise, because there was nothing else left to do. Morning came too quickly. Elena packed a single bag with the few things that mattered to her, a photograph of her mother that she had kept hidden for years, a small blue ribbon that had once tied her hair as a child, a worn book of poems her mother had left behind. She did not know what kind of life waited for her, but she wanted to bring something of her old one with her. A car arrived just after sunrise, sleek and black, unlike anything Elena had ever seen in their small town. The driver who stepped out was quiet and unreadable, dressed in a dark suit that made him look like he belonged to a different world entirely. He did not introduce himself. He simply opened the back door and waited. Edward stood on the porch, watching. For a moment, Elena thought he might say something, might apologize, might ask her to forgive him. Instead, he only said, "Be careful." "You should have thought of that before you signed me away," Elena replied, and then she walked to the car without looking back, because if she looked back, she was afraid she might cry, and she refused to give her father the satisfaction of seeing her tears. The drive out of town took hours. Elena watched the familiar hills fade behind her, replaced slowly by unfamiliar forests, tall and dark and endless. The trees here grew close together, their branches tangled overhead like fingers laced in prayer, blocking out most of the sunlight. The deeper they drove, the colder the air seemed to become, though Elena knew that was probably only her imagination. She tried to ask the driver questions. Where exactly were they going? What would happen to her once she arrived? Who was this Alpha King she had been traded to? But the driver only answered with silence, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if her questions did not deserve a response. Eventually, Elena gave up asking, and simply watched the world change around her instead. The forest gave way to open fields, and in the distance, she saw it for the first time. A castle, or something very close to one, built from gray stone, and standing against the mountains like it had grown there naturally, like it was as old as the land itself. Towers rose high enough to disappear into the low clouds. Even from a distance, it looked less like a home and more like a fortress, built to keep people out, or perhaps to keep someone in. Elena's heart pounded as the car approached the massive iron gates. Guards stood at the entrance, tall men with sharp eyes, who watched the car pass without expression. She felt like a prisoner being delivered to a cell, though technically, she supposed, that was not far from the truth. The car finally stopped in a wide stone courtyard, and the driver opened her door. Elena stepped out on unsteady legs, clutching her small bag to her chest, and looked up at the castle towering above her. It was even larger up close, imposing in a way that made her feel impossibly small. A woman approached her, older, with kind eyes but a stern expression, dressed in simple but well-made clothing. "You must be Elena," the woman said. "My name is Nora. I manage the household here. Come, I will show you where you will be staying." "Where is he?" Elena asked, her voice smaller than she wanted it to be. "The Alpha King." Nora's expression flickered with something Elena could not quite read. "He will see you when he is ready. For now, let us get you settled." Elena followed Nora through the towering doors of the castle, into a world completely unlike anything she had ever known. The halls were lined with old paintings and tall windows, the floors made of polished stone that echoed with every footstep. Everything about the place felt ancient and powerful, as if the walls themselves remembered centuries of history that Elena knew nothing about. As they walked, Elena noticed other people, servants and guards, all of whom stopped what they were doing to watch her pass. Some looked curious. Some looked concerned. A few looked something closer to pity, and that unsettled Elena more than anything else. What did they know about her situation that she did not? "Why does everyone keep staring at me?" Elena finally asked. Nora hesitated before answering. "It is not every day that someone new arrives at Ashcroft territory," she said carefully, "especially not like this." "Like what?" Nora did not answer that question. Instead, she led Elena up a wide staircase and down a long hallway, stopping finally at a heavy wooden door. "This will be your room," she said, pushing the door open, to reveal a space far grander than anything Elena had ever slept in before. A large bed sat near tall windows overlooking the mountains, and the furniture around the room looked as though it belonged to royalty. "I don't understand," Elena said quietly, looking around the room. "I thought I was traded here to pay off a debt. Why does it look like I am being treated as a guest?" "You will have your answers soon enough," Nora said gently. "Rest for now. There is a bath prepared, and clean clothing in the wardrobe. Someone will come for you this evening." Before Elena could ask anything else, Nora turned and left the room, closing the heavy door behind her, leaving Elena alone in the strange, beautiful, terrifying place that was now, apparently, her home. Elena sat on the edge of the enormous bed, staring at her small bag still clutched in her lap. Everything had happened so fast. Yesterday, she had been washing dishes in her father's kitchen, worrying about nothing more serious than the leaking roof and the unpaid electric bill. Today, she was sitting in a castle that belonged to a man everyone called a king, waiting to be summoned like a prisoner awaiting sentencing. She walked to the window and looked out at the mountains beyond, at the endless dark forest stretching in every direction. Somewhere out there was the road that led back to her old life, back to her father, back to everything familiar. But that road felt impossibly far away now, as if it belonged to a different life entirely. She did not know what waited for her that evening. She did not know what kind of man the Alpha King truly was, whether the stories about him were exaggerated, or whether they had not gone far enough. All she knew was that her life, as she had known it, was over, and whatever came next was completely out of her control. For the first time since the men had walked into her father's house the night before, Elena allowed herself to cry, quietly, sitting alone on the edge of a bed that did not belong to her, in a castle full of strangers, waiting for a king she had never met to decide what would happen to her next. Outside her window, the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep red, and somewhere within the walls of that ancient castle, a man who had spent years searching for a face he had almost given up hope of ever finding again, was about to be told that she had finally arrived. Elena woke to the sound of a soft knock on her door, and for a moment, she forgot where she was. The unfamiliar ceiling above her, the heavy curtains, the strange quiet that filled the room, none of it matched her small bedroom back home. Then the memories of the previous day came rushing back, and her stomach tightened with dread. "Come in," she called, sitting up and pulling the blanket around her shoulders. Nora entered, carrying a tray with tea and bread, along with a folded note. "Good morning," she said, setting the tray down on a small table near the window. "I hope you managed to rest." "Not really," Elena admitted, glancing at the note. "What is that?" "A summons," Nora said simply. "The Alpha King wishes to see you this afternoon." Elena's heart dropped into her stomach. She had known this moment was coming, but knowing it and being ready for it were two very different things. "What is he like?" she asked, unable to stop herself. "Everyone keeps looking at me like they know something I don't." Nora hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "He is not what most people expect," she said. "But I think it is best if you meet him yourself, without my opinions shaping what you expect to see." That answer did nothing to calm Elena's nerves, but she nodded anyway, understanding that Nora would not say more no matter how many times she asked. The hours before the meeting passed slowly and painfully. Nora returned with a set of clothes, far finer than anything Elena owned, a deep green dress that fit as though it had been made for her exactly. Elena wondered, with a chill, whether it had been prepared in advance, whether someone had known her measurements before she had even arrived. It was a small detail, but it added to the strange feeling that had been building inside her since she crossed into Ashcroft territory. The feeling that she was not simply a random payment for a debt, but something else entirely, something she did not yet understand. When the time finally came, a guard arrived to escort her through the castle halls. Elena's legs felt unsteady beneath her, though she forced herself to walk with her chin lifted, refusing to let anyone see how frightened she truly was. The guard led her through corridor after corridor, past tall windows and old tapestries, until they reached a set of enormous double doors carved with the image of a wolf standing beneath a crown of stars. The guard pushed the doors open, and Elena stepped into a grand hall, unlike anything she had ever seen. Tall pillars lined the walls, and at the far end, on a raised platform, stood a throne carved from dark wood. But it was not the throne that caught Elena's attention. It was the man standing beside it. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair, and eyes so pale they seemed almost silver in the light streaming through the high windows. He wore simple clothing, no crown, no obvious symbols of power, yet there was something in the way he stood, still and commanding, that made it impossible to mistake him for anyone but the man in charge of this entire territory. This, Elena realized with a sinking feeling, was the Alpha King. She expected him to look at her the way the scarred man had looked at her the night before, like an item being appraised, like property. Instead, the moment his eyes found her face, something shifted in his expression, something Elena could not name. His entire body went still, as if the air had been pulled from his lungs. For a long, uncomfortable moment, he simply stared at her, saying nothing at all. "Your Majesty," the guard said carefully, breaking the silence. "This is Elena Hart." The Alpha King did not respond right away. He took a step closer, his pale eyes moving over her face, as though searching for something specific, something he desperately needed to find. Elena felt her skin prickle under his gaze, uncertain whether she should feel afraid or simply confused. "Leave us," the Alpha King finally said, his voice low and steady, though there was a strange tightness beneath it. The guard bowed and left without hesitation, closing the heavy doors behind him, leaving Elena alone in the grand hall with the most powerful man in the Northern Territory. "You may sit," he said, gesturing toward a chair near the platform. Elena did not move. "I would rather stand," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "If it is all the same to you." Something flickered across his face, an emotion she could not quite place. Was it amusement? Respect? She could not tell. "As you wish," he said. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elena studied him carefully, trying to reconcile the stories she had heard with the man standing in front of her. He did not look like a monster. He did not look cruel. If anything, he looked tired, as though he carried some invisible weight that had been sitting on his shoulders for a very long time. "You are wondering why I brought you here," he said finally. "I know why," Elena replied. "My father owed your pack a debt. I was traded to settle it. That is what your father believes, the Alpha King said, and something in his tone made Elena's stomach twist uneasily. It is not entirely the truth. What do you mean? He studied her for another long moment before answering. Tell me your mother's name. The question caught Elena completely off guard. My mother, she repeated. What does she have to do with any of this? Please, he said, and for the first time, his voice softened slightly, losing some of its royal authority. Just answer the question. Elena hesitated, unsure why this stranger would care about a woman who had vanished from her life 18 years ago, a woman her father refused to even speak about. Miriam, she said finally. Her name was Miriam. The Alpha King closed his eyes briefly, as though the name confirmed something he had both hoped for and feared. When he opened them again, there was an intensity in his gaze that made Elena take an involuntary step backward. Where is she now? He asked. Your mother. I don't know, Elena admitted, her voice quieter now. She disappeared when I was 3 years old. My father never told me what happened. He never spoke about her at all. The Alpha King was silent for a long moment, and Elena could see something working behind his pale eyes, some calculation, some memory being turned over and examined. 18 years, he murmured, almost to himself. That matches. Matches what? Elena demanded, her patience finally breaking. You are speaking in riddles. I do not understand any of this. Tell me plainly why you are asking about my mother, and tell me what I am doing here. The Alpha King straightened, seeming to catch himself, as though he had revealed more than he intended. Forgive me, he said. This is a great deal to process. I understand. What is your full name? Elena Hart. And your mother's full name, before she married your father? Elena frowned, trying to remember details she had barely been allowed to know. I believe it was Miriam Ashcroft, she said slowly, though I never understood the connection. My father always said it was simply a coincidence, that there were many families with that name. The moment the words left her mouth, something changed in the Alpha King's face, something that looked almost like relief, mixed with old, deep grief. There is no coincidence, he said quietly. Ashcroft is not a common name outside of this territory. Your mother was born here, Elena. She was part of this pack before she disappeared 18 years ago. Elena felt the floor tilt slightly beneath her feet. That is impossible, she said, though even as she spoke the words, she felt the ground of her certainty crumbling. My father never mentioned anything like that. He never said a single word about her having any connection to this place. Your father, the Alpha King said carefully, may have known far more than he ever told you. Elena's mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. If her mother truly had been part of the Ashcroft pack, why had her father never spoken of it? Why had he kept it buried for 18 years, only for it to surface now, in the strangest possible way, through a debt he owed to the very family her mother had apparently come from? Why does this matter to you? Elena finally asked. Why does my mother's past have anything to do with why I am standing here right now? The Alpha King studied her for a long moment before answering, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that Elena felt settle deep into her chest. Because I have spent 18 years searching for the daughter of a woman this pack lost, he said. A woman who vanished under circumstances no one has ever fully explained, and I did not expect, of all the ways I imagined finding her, that she would be delivered to my door as payment for a debt her father owed. Elena stared at him, trying to absorb what he was telling her. You are saying you already knew about me, she said slowly. Before I arrived here yesterday, you already knew I existed. I suspected, he corrected gently. I had searched for years without success. Your mother left no trace behind her, no records, nothing that could lead me to where she had gone, or whether she had left behind any family. When your father's debt collectors reported the details of his household, including a daughter of the right age with no known mother, I asked to see you before any arrangement was finalized. I needed to know if it was truly you. And now that you know? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Alpha King's expression grew unreadable again, though something behind his pale eyes seemed to soften. Now I know, he said, that you are not simply a debt that has been paid. You are something far more important than that, whether you realize it yet or not. Elena did not know how to respond to that. Her entire understanding of why she was standing in this castle had just been turned upside down. She had believed she was nothing more than an object traded to erase her father's mistakes. Now she was being told that her presence here was connected to a mystery involving a mother she barely remembered, a mother whose disappearance had apparently mattered enough for the most powerful man in the territory to spend years searching for answers. "I want to know everything," Elena said finally, steadying her voice as best she could. "Everything about my mother, everything you know that my father kept from me." The Alpha King studied her for a long moment, and Elena thought she saw something like respect flicker across his face. "It will take time," he said. "There is much you do not know, and some of it may be difficult to hear. But I promise you this, you will not leave this castle without the truth. You have my word." Elena did not fully trust him yet, not after everything that had happened in the past 2 days, not after being traded away like an object with no say in her own future. But there was something in the way he spoke, something steady and sincere, that made her want to believe him, even as every instinct told her to remain cautious. "Why does everyone in this castle look at me the way they do?" she asked suddenly. "The servants, the guards. They all seem to know something." The Alpha King's jaw tightened slightly. "Because they remember your mother," he said, "and because they can see the resemblance, the same way I saw it the moment you walked through those doors." Elena felt a chill run through her at those words. She had never known what her mother looked like beyond a single faded photograph her father had kept hidden in a locked drawer, one she had found by accident years ago, and never dared ask about. To hear that an entire castle full of strangers recognized her mother's face in her own was almost too strange to fully comprehend. "I need time," Elena said finally, her voice unsteady. "This is too much to understand all at once." "Of course," the Alpha King said, and for the first time since she had entered the hall, something close to gentleness entered his voice. "Nora will show you to the gardens, if you would like some air. We will speak again soon, when you are ready." Elena nodded, though her mind was still spinning with questions that had no answers yet. As she turned to leave the grand hall, she paused at the doors and looked back at him one final time. "What is your name?" she asked. "I have only heard you called the Alpha King." Something flickered in his pale eyes, something that might have been the ghost of a smile. "Gareth," he said quietly. "My name is Gareth Ashcroft." Elena repeated the name silently to herself as she walked out of the grand hall, feeling the weight of everything she had just learned settling heavily onto her shoulders. She had arrived at this castle, believing herself to be nothing more than payment for her father's mistakes. Now she was beginning to understand that her arrival here was tied to something far older, far deeper, and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. A secret her own father had buried for 18 years, one that was only now beginning to surface. As she stepped out into the cool afternoon air of the castle gardens, Elena could not shake the feeling that her life, the one she had known before yesterday, was gone forever, replaced by something she did not yet understand, but that she was now determined to uncover, no matter what the truth might cost her. The garden was quiet, far quieter than Elena expected from a place attached to such a powerful castle. Stone paths wound between tall hedges and rows of flowers that seemed unusually vibrant for the season, and somewhere nearby, water trickled softly from a fountain she could not see. Elena sat on a cold stone bench, her mind still spinning from everything Gareth had told her, unable to fully grasp that the mother she barely remembered had once walked these same paths. She did not notice the young woman approaching until she was standing right beside the bench. "You must be Elena," the woman said, her voice warm and curious. She looked to be about the same age as Elena, with light brown hair, pulled into a loose braid and an easy smile. "I am Willa. I work here in the gardens, mostly, though Nora likes to keep me busy with other tasks as well." "Elena," she replied, managing a small smile of her own despite everything weighing on her mind. "It's nice to meet someone who doesn't look at me like I'm a ghost." Willa laughed softly, sitting down on the bench beside her without waiting for an invitation. "That's because I never met your mother myself. I've only heard the stories. The older staff, though, they remember her well. She used to walk in this exact garden, they say, every morning before the sun was fully up." Elena's chest tightened at the mention of her mother again. "What do you know about her?" she asked. "Please, anything at all would help. My father never spoke of her, not once in 18 years. Willa's smile faded slightly, replaced by something more thoughtful. "I only know what I've overheard," she admitted, "that she was gentle, but strong-willed." That she left suddenly, in the middle of the night, without any explanation. Some of the older guards still whisper about it when they think no one is listening. Do they know why she left? Willa shook her head. No one seems to agree on that. Some say she ran because she was afraid of something. Others say she was forced out. A few even say she was taken. She paused, glancing sideways at Elena. I probably should not be telling you any of this. It is not really my place. Please, Elena said, leaning forward. I need to understand what happened to her. I need to understand why I am here. Willa studied her for a long moment before sighing softly. There is someone who might know more than anyone else in this castle, she said finally. An old woman named Agnes. She used to serve your mother directly, back when your mother lived here. She still lives in the castle, though she rarely leaves her quarters these days. If anyone remembers the full truth, it would be her. Elena felt a spark of hope for the first time since she had arrived. Can you take me to her? Willa hesitated, glancing around the garden as though checking for anyone who might overhear. I can try, she said quietly, but we should be careful. Not everyone in this castle wants old secrets dug up again. That warning sent a small chill down Elena's spine, but her need to understand the truth outweighed her caution. I don't care about being careful, she said. I have spent my whole life not knowing anything about my own mother. I am not going to waste this chance. Willa nodded slowly, seeming to make up her mind. Come with me then, but quietly. They left the garden through a narrow side path, weaving through quieter corridors of the castle that Elena had not yet seen, away from the grand halls and polished floors of the main wing. The walls here were older, the stone worn smooth by centuries of hands passing along them, and the air smelled faintly of dust and dried herbs. Eventually, Willa stopped in front of a small wooden door tucked into a corner of the hallway, and knocked gently. After a long pause, a frail voice called out from inside. Come in then, whoever you are. Willa pushed the door open, revealing a small, cozy room lit by candlelight, its walls lined with shelves of old books and dried flowers. An elderly woman sat near the window in a worn but comfortable chair, her white hair pulled back neatly, her eyes sharp despite the wrinkles around them. Agnes, Willa said gently. This is Elena, Miriam's daughter. The old woman's sharp eyes moved to Elena, and her entire expression shifted, softening into something between shock and sorrow. By the stars, she whispered, setting down the book she had been holding. You look exactly like her. Exactly. Elena stepped further into the room, her heart pounding. You knew my mother? I served her for 6 years, Agnes said, gesturing for Elena to sit in the chair across from her. Long before you were born, and for a short while after. I never imagined I would live to see her daughter standing in this room. Elena sat down carefully, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Please, she said, tell me everything. My father never spoke a single word about her. I don't even know why she left, or why she never came back for me. Agnes was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant, as though she were looking through the years, rather than at the woman sitting in front of her. Your mother was kind, she finally said, kinder than most people born into power ever managed to be. She cared deeply for this pack, for its people. But there were those within these walls who did not want her here. Why not? Elena asked. Because of what she represented, Agnes said. Your mother was born with a bloodline older than the current ruling family, one that many believed had been lost generations ago. When it became clear that bloodline had survived through her, certain members of the pack grew afraid of what that meant for their own power. Elena frowned, trying to follow. What does that mean exactly? A bloodline? Agnes glanced toward the door, as though making sure it was fully closed, before lowering her voice further. There are old stories in this territory, she said, about a line of wolves said to carry a strength beyond the ordinary, tied to the very founding of this land. Most believe that line had died out centuries ago, but your mother was proof that it had not, and bloodlines like that do not simply disappear once discovered. They become targets. A chill ran through Elena's entire body. Are you saying she was in danger? That someone here wanted to hurt her? Agnes nodded slowly. There were whispers, threats disguised as warnings. I do not know the full details of what finally drove her away, only that one night, she was gone, and no explanation was ever given to the staff. The current Alpha King's father, who ruled before him, ordered the matter closed, and forbidden from discussion. Anyone who asked too many questions was quickly reminded to mind their place. Elena sat in stunned silence, trying to absorb everything she was hearing. Her mother had not simply vanished by choice, as her father had always implied through his silence. She had been forced out, or had fled from a danger so serious that an entire castle had been ordered never to speak of it again. "Does Gareth know this?" Elena asked. "The current Alpha King. He was only a boy when it happened," Agnes said. "Younger than you are now. I do not know how much he has managed to piece together over the years, though I have heard he has spent a great deal of time trying to uncover the truth of what happened to her. Perhaps more than his father ever wanted him to." Elena thought back to the intensity in Gareth's pale eyes when he had first seen her, the way he had gone completely still, as though seeing a ghost. It made sense now, in a strange and unsettling way. He had not simply been searching for a random woman who might complete some mysterious puzzle. He had been searching for the daughter of a woman whose disappearance had haunted him since he was a child. Why would he care so much? Elena asked quietly. Why would this matter to him personally? Agnes studied her for a long moment before answering, and something careful entered her expression, as though she were weighing how much more to reveal. "That," she said slowly, "is a question you should ask him directly, when you feel ready to hear the answer. It is not entirely my story to tell." Elena wanted to press further, but something in the old woman's expression told her that no amount of asking would loosen her tongue any further on that particular subject. She would have to find the courage to ask Gareth herself. "Thank you," Elena said instead, standing slowly, "for telling me what you have. It is more than I have ever known about her in my entire life." Agnes reached out and took Elena's hand in her own frail, wrinkled one, her sharp eyes suddenly warm. "Be careful, child," she said softly. "The same danger that drove your mother away has not fully disappeared from these walls. There are still those within this pack who would rather your bloodline stayed buried." Those words settled heavily in Elena's chest as she and Willa made their way back through the quiet corridors, away from Agnes's small, candlelit room. She had come to this castle believing herself to be nothing more than a debt paid off in the cruelest way imaginable. Now she was beginning to understand that she carried something inside her, some inherited danger, that made her far more important and far more vulnerable than she had ever realized. "Are you all right?" Willa asked gently as they walked, noticing the troubled look on Elena's face. "I don't know," Elena admitted honestly. "Everything I thought I understood about my life has changed in less than 2 days. I don't know what to believe anymore, or who I can trust." Willa was quiet for a moment before offering a small, reassuring smile. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you can trust the Alpha King. Whatever else people say about him, he has never been cruel to anyone in this castle. Not once. Not in all the years I have worked here. If he is searching for answers about your mother, I believe it is because he genuinely wants to help you, not because he wants to use you." Elena wanted to believe that, but after everything her father had done, after being traded away without a single say in her own fate, trust did not come easily to her anymore. Still, she held on to Willa's words as they walked back toward the main wing of the castle, a small thread of hope in the middle of so much uncertainty. As they turned a corner near the grand hall, Elena nearly collided with someone walking quickly in the opposite direction. She looked up, startled, to find a tall man with sharp features and cold eyes staring down at her, his expression unreadable, in a way that immediately put her on edge. "You must be the girl everyone is talking about," the man said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge beneath it that made Elena's instincts prickle with unease. "Miriam's daughter, brought back to us at last. How interesting." "I'm sorry," Elena said carefully, stepping back slightly. "I don't believe we've met." The man's mouth curled into something that was not quite a smile. "No," he agreed. "Not yet, but I imagine we will be seeing a great deal more of each other very soon." Before Elena could ask anything further, the man walked past her without another word, disappearing down the corridor with the same cold efficiency with which he had appeared. Elena turned to Willa, whose face had gone noticeably paler. "Who was that?" Elena asked. Willa glanced down the now empty hallway before answering, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "That," she said, "was Damon Cole. He leads one of the neighboring packs, and he has never once visited Ashcroft territory without a reason. If he already knows who you are, that means word is spreading faster than anyone expected." Elena felt a cold weight settle in her stomach as she watched the empty hallway where the man had disappeared. Agnes's warning echoed in her mind, about danger that had not fully disappeared from these walls, about a bloodline that certain people would rather stayed buried forever. She had only been in this castle for a single day, and already it seemed the past her mother had run from was beginning to circle back around her, faster than she was prepared for. That night, sleep refused to come easily to Elena. She lay awake in the enormous bed, staring at the shadows dancing across the ceiling from the flickering candle Nora had left burning low, replaying every word Damon Cole had spoken in the hallway. His tone had carried a threat wrapped in politeness, the kind of danger that hid behind smooth words and careful smiles. She did not know what he wanted with her, but she knew, instinctively, that it was nothing good. A soft knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts sometime after midnight. Elena sat up slowly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Who is it?" "It's Gareth," came the reply, his voice low through the heavy wood. "May I come in? I understand if you would rather I did not, given the hour." Elena hesitated only a moment before answering. "You may." The door opened, and Gareth stepped inside, looking less like the composed alpha king she had met earlier that day, and more like a man carrying something heavy on his mind. He remained near the door, keeping a respectful distance, his pale eyes catching the candlelight. "I heard you encountered Damon Cole this afternoon," he said, without preamble. Elena straightened, pulling her knees up beneath the blanket. "Word travels quickly around here." "It does, especially concerning him," Gareth said, a hint of tension entering his voice. "I am sorry you had to face that without warning. I should have told you about him before you had the chance to run into him unprepared." "Who is he, exactly?" Elena asked. Willa said he leads a neighboring pack, but the way she said it made him sound like more than just a neighbor. Gareth's jaw tightened slightly before he answered. "Damon Cole leads the Cole Pack, which borders our territory to the east. His family and mine have never been on friendly terms, not for generations. But his sudden interest in you concerns me a great deal more than any old rivalry." "Why?" Elena pressed. "What could he possibly want with me? I only arrived here yesterday." Gareth moved further into the room, though he stopped a respectful distance from the bed, choosing to lean against the wall near the window instead. "Because if the old stories about your mother's bloodline are true," he said carefully, "then you are not simply the daughter of a woman who once lived here. You may be the last living heir to something that many packs in this region have spent generations trying to control, or destroy." Elena's stomach twisted uncomfortably. "Agnes mentioned something about a bloodline," she admitted. "She said my mother carried a strength tied to the founding of this territory, something people believed had died out long ago." Gareth's expression shifted, something flickering behind his pale eyes that looked almost like relief, as if he were glad she already knew part of the truth. "So she told you," he said quietly. "I wondered if she would." "She said it wasn't entirely her story to tell," Elena said, watching him carefully. "She said I should ask you directly." Gareth was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting toward the window, toward the dark mountains beyond. "The founding bloodline of this territory is said to grant those who carry it an unusual strength, one that surfaces only under specific circumstances, and only in moments of great need. For centuries, it was believed extinct, until your mother was born carrying traces of it. When that became known, certain packs in this region grew concerned about what it might mean for the balance of power here." "Including your family?" Elena asked carefully. "My father, yes," Gareth admitted, his voice tightening. "He saw her as a threat to be managed, rather than a person to be protected. I did not understand that as a child. I only understood that someone I cared about disappeared one night, and no one would ever tell me why." Elena's breath caught. "You cared about her? My mother?" Gareth's expression grew distant, caught somewhere between memory and regret. "She used to walk with me through the gardens when I was young," he said quietly. "My own mother had passed when I was very small, and Miriam was kind to me in ways few others in this castle ever were. I was only 12 years old when she disappeared. I searched for her for years afterward, quietly, without my father's knowledge, because I could never accept that she had simply vanished without a trace." Elena sat in stunned silence, absorbing this new piece of the puzzle. The intensity she had seen in his eyes when he first looked at her finally made complete sense. He was not simply searching for some mysterious bloodline heir. He was searching for the daughter of a woman who had shown him kindness during one of the loneliest periods of his life, a woman whose disappearance had left a wound that had never fully healed. "I'm sorry," Elena said softly, "that you lost her too." Gareth looked at her then, something raw and unguarded passing across his face, before he composed himself again. "When I became Alpha King 2 years ago, one of the first things I did was reopen the investigation into her disappearance, against the wishes of several of my father's old advisors. I found very little. Whoever helped her leave was careful to erase almost every trace, but I did learn that she had married outside the pack, and that she had a daughter." "Me," Elena said quietly. "You," he confirmed. "I spent the last 2 years trying to locate you, hoping to offer protection before anyone else discovered the truth. I never imagined you would be delivered here as payment for a debt your father owed to my own pack's collectors, men who had no idea who you truly were when they made that arrangement." Elena felt a strange mixture of emotions rising inside her, relief that at least someone in this situation seemed to genuinely care about her well-being, mixed with anger that her father's poor decisions had placed her directly into the middle of a danger she never asked to be part of. "Why didn't my father tell me any of this?" she asked, more to herself than to Gareth. He must have known, at least some of it. "I do not know what your father knew," Gareth admitted, "but I intend to find out, carefully, without putting either of you at further risk." "And Damon Cole?" Elena asked. "Why does he already seem to know who I am?" Gareth's expression darkened. "That troubles me more than anything else. Word of your arrival should not have traveled so quickly, especially not to a rival pack. It suggests someone within these walls informed him directly, which means we may have a larger problem than I initially realized." A chill crept down Elena's spine at the implication. "You think someone here is working with him?" "I think it is a possibility I cannot ignore," Gareth said grimly. "Until I understand who might be involved, I want you to remain close to Nora or Willa whenever possible, and avoid wandering the castle alone, particularly near the eastern wing, where guests are typically received." Elena nodded slowly, though the weight of everything she had learned in the past few hours pressed heavily on her chest. Only 2 days ago, her greatest worry had been the leaking roof of her father's house. Now she was being warned about hidden enemies within an ancient castle, tied to a bloodline she barely understood, being hunted by a rival pack leader whose motives remained a mystery. "Why are you telling me all of this?" Elena asked quietly. "You could have simply let me remain in the dark, treated me as nothing more than a debt paid off, the way everyone expected. Instead, you're treating me like someone whose safety actually matters to you." Gareth's pale eyes met hers directly, something steady and sincere settling into his expression. "Because you are not a debt, Elena. Whatever paperwork your father signed, whatever arrangement was made between him and my collectors, none of that changes what you actually are to me, or to this territory. You deserve the truth, even the difficult parts of it, and you deserve to make your own choices about what happens next, rather than having those choices made for you by men who see you as nothing more than an object to be traded." Elena felt something shift inside her chest at those words, a small crack forming in the wall of distrust she had built since the moment those debt collectors first walked into her father's home. She was not ready to fully trust him, not yet, not after everything that had happened. But for the first time since arriving at Ashcroft territory, she felt as though someone in this castle actually saw her as a person, rather than a piece to be moved around a larger game. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for telling me the truth, even the parts that must be difficult for you as well." Gareth nodded, straightening from where he leaned against the wall. "Get some rest, if you can," he said gently. "I have doubled the guards stationed near your wing of the castle. You are safe here tonight, I promise you that." As he turned to leave, Elena spoke again, surprising herself with the question. "Gareth." He paused, looking back at her. "What happens now? To me, I mean, now that you know who I truly am." Gareth was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer carefully. "Now," he said finally, "we uncover the truth together. About your mother, about what happened to her, and about what this bloodline truly means for your future. And I promise you this, Elena. Whatever we find, you will never again be treated as something to be traded away without your consent. Not while I am the one responsible for what happens within these walls." He left the room quietly after that, closing the door behind him, and Elena sat alone in the flickering candlelight for a long time afterward, turning his words over in her mind. Outside her window, the mountains stood dark and silent against the night sky, hiding whatever secrets still remained buried within Ashcroft territory, secrets that Elena was now determined to uncover, no matter what dangers waited for her along the way. Over the following days, Elena began to settle, though uneasily, into the strange rhythm of life within Ashcroft territory. Nora made sure she was never left idle for long, introducing her to the running of the household, teaching her the layout of the castle, the names of the staff, the quiet routines that kept such a massive place functioning smoothly. Willa remained close by whenever her garden duties allowed, and Elena found herself grateful for the friendship growing between them, one of the few steady things in a world that had turned completely upside down. But it was her growing awareness of Gareth that unsettled Elena most of all. She caught him watching her sometimes, across the dining hall during meals, or from a distance in the courtyard when she walked with Willa in the mornings. It was not the calculating stare of a man who saw her as property, nor was it entirely the concerned gaze of someone simply worried for her safety. There was something else beneath it, something Elena did not fully understand yet, something that made her pulse quicken in ways she did not want to examine too closely. One afternoon, she found him alone in the castle library, a vast room lined floor to ceiling with old books, the kind of place Elena had not expected to exist within a fortress built for war and power. He sat near the tall windows, a book open in his lap, though his eyes were fixed somewhere beyond the pages, lost in thought. "I didn't know you read," Elena said, stepping into the room hesitantly. Gareth looked up, and something in his expression softened immediately at the sight of her. "There is little else to do during quiet afternoons," he admitted, closing the book gently. "Please, come in. You do not need permission to enter the library." Elena moved further inside, running her fingers along the spines of old books as she walked past the shelves, feeling oddly at peace in the quiet room, despite everything weighing on her mind. "My mother liked to read," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the memory. "I remember that much at least. My father kept a few of her old books hidden away, though he never let me read them as a child. I found them years later, tucked behind other things in a closet." "Do you still have them?" Gareth asked, his voice gentle. "One," Elena admitted. "A small book of poems. I brought it with me when I left." Gareth was quiet for a moment, watching her with an expression Elena could not fully read. "She used to read to me sometimes," he said finally. "When I was a child, and my own mother had already passed. I did not remember that until you mentioned it just now." Strange, how memory works. Elena sat down slowly in the chair across from him, feeling an unexpected closeness settle between them, born from the shared, fragmented memories of a woman neither of them had fully understood. "Tell me more about her," Elena said softly. "Please. Anything you remember." Gareth considered her request carefully before beginning. "She had a way of making even the coldest corners of this castle feel warm," he said. "I remember she used to hum while she walked through the gardens, some old tune I never learned the name of. She was patient with me, even when I was a difficult, grieving child who did not always deserve her patience." Elena listened, hungry for every small detail, piecing together a picture of her mother that her father had denied her for 18 years. "Why do you think my father never told me any of this?" she asked. "Why would he keep something like this buried for so long?" Gareth's expression grew thoughtful. "Perhaps he was trying to protect you," he offered. "If he understood even part of the danger tied to her bloodline, perhaps he believed silence was the safest choice. Or perhaps," he added more quietly, "he simply could not bear to speak of losing her." Elena had not considered that possibility before, that her father's silence might have come from grief rather than indifference. It did not excuse what he had done, trading her away without her consent, but it added a layer of complexity to a man she had spent most of her life believing she understood completely. Their conversation drifted easily after that, moving between lighter subjects, the books Elena had loved as a child, small stories from Gareth's own childhood, before the weight of leadership had settled onto his shoulders. Elena found herself laughing for the first time since arriving at the castle, a sound that surprised even her, given everything that had happened over the past several days. "You have a nice laugh," Gareth said quietly, something warm settling into his pale eyes. "I don't think I've heard it until just now." Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks, unsure how to respond to the sincerity in his voice. There hasn't been much reason to laugh lately, she admitted. No, Gareth agreed softly. I imagine there hasn't been. The moment stretched between them, comfortable, and yet charged with something neither of them fully acknowledged. Elena found herself studying the way the afternoon light caught his pale eyes, the quiet strength in the way he carried himself, even in a moment of stillness, and she felt a small, unwelcome flutter in her chest that she quickly tried to push away. This man, whatever kindness he had shown her, was still the alpha king of the very pack her father owed a debt to. She reminded herself firmly that gratitude and attraction were not the same thing, that she needed to remain cautious, that trusting too quickly, in a place so full of hidden dangers, could prove costly. And yet, despite every warning she gave herself, Elena could not fully ignore the way her heart had begun to soften toward him. Their quiet afternoon was interrupted by a sharp knock at the library door. A guard entered quickly, his expression tense. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing briefly. "Damon Cole has requested an audience. He says the matter cannot wait." Gareth's entire demeanor shifted instantly, the warmth from moments before, replaced by the controlled authority Elena had first seen the day they met. "Where is he now?" "Waiting in the Eastern Receiving Hall," the guard replied. Gareth stood, glancing back at Elena, with an expression that carried both apology and warning. "Stay here," he said, "please. Whatever Damon wants, I do not want you anywhere near him, until I understand his intentions." Elena nodded, though unease settled heavily in her chest, as she watched Gareth leave the library, the guard following closely behind him. She sat alone among the tall shelves of books for several long minutes, trying to distract herself, though her mind kept circling back to Damon Cole's cold smile in the hallway days earlier, and Agnes's warning about danger that had never fully left these walls. Unable to sit still any longer, Elena rose and made her way carefully toward the eastern wing, staying close to the shadows of the corridor, curiosity overpowering her better judgment. She had promised to stay in the library, but she needed to understand what threat Damon Cole represented, needed to know what danger she might actually be facing. She reached a narrow alcove near the receiving hall, just as raised voices carried through the partially open doors. "You cannot keep her hidden away forever," Damon's smooth voice said, carrying an edge of impatience. "Word has already spread beyond your territory. Other packs will want to know what you intend to do with her." "She is not a possession to be discussed and traded among packs," Gareth replied, his voice sharp with barely restrained anger. "She is under my protection, and that protection is not open for negotiation." "Protection," Damon repeated, something mocking in his tone. "Is that truly what you call it? Or have you simply found a convenient way to secure that bloodline for yourself, before anyone else has the chance?" "Careful, Damon," Gareth warned, his voice low and dangerous. "I am simply stating what every pack leader in this region is already thinking," Damon continued smoothly. "A bloodline like hers has not surfaced in generations. Whoever controls her controls a significant advantage. I would rather we discuss terms now, as allies, than find ourselves as enemies later." "There will be no terms," Gareth said firmly. "She is not a bargaining piece, and I will not entertain any suggestion that treats her as one." Elena's heart pounded as she listened, pressed against the cold stone wall of the alcove, torn between fear and a strange, fierce gratitude toward the man defending her so firmly on the other side of those doors. Whatever else remained uncertain about her situation, one thing had become increasingly clear. Damon Cole saw her only as a prize to be claimed, while Gareth, despite everything, seemed determined to protect her as a person, not merely as a valuable bloodline to be controlled. "This conversation is over," Gareth said finally, his tone leaving no room for further argument. "You will leave my territory before nightfall, Damon, and do not return uninvited again." Elena quickly retreated from the alcove, hurrying back toward the library, before anyone could discover she had been listening. Her mind raced with everything she had just heard, the confirmation that other packs beyond Ashcroft territory were already aware of her bloodline, already circling with their own ambitions, already viewing her as nothing more than a valuable prize to be won. She reached the library just as Gareth returned, his expression still tight with lingering anger from the confrontation. He paused when he saw her, studying her face carefully, as though sensing immediately that something had changed. "You heard," he said quietly. "It was not a question." Elena did not bother denying it. Some of it, she admitted. Enough to understand that I am in far more danger than I realized when I first arrived here. Gareth's expression softened slightly, though the tension remained clear in the set of his shoulders. I will not let anyone take you, Elena, he said, his voice steady and certain. Whatever Damon Cole believes he is entitled to, whatever other packs may think they can claim, I promise you this. You are under my protection, and I intend to honor that promise, no matter what it costs me. Elena looked at him for a long moment, searching his pale eyes for any sign of deception, and finding none. Whatever complicated feelings had begun stirring inside her over the past several days, she realized in that moment that she believed him completely, and that belief, more than anything else since her arrival, felt like the first true piece of solid ground beneath her feet. 3 days passed after Damon Cole's departure, 3 days of watchful quiet that Elena could not quite bring herself to trust. Gareth had doubled the guards along the outer walls, and Nora insisted Elena remain within the main castle grounds, never venturing beyond the gardens without an escort. The peaceful rhythm Elena had begun to find within Ashcroft territory now felt fragile, like a held breath waiting to be released. It was Willa who noticed the first sign that something was wrong. There's a rider approaching from the eastern road, she said one morning, appearing breathlessly at Elena's door. Nora sent me to find you. She wants you inside the main hall, away from the windows. Elena's stomach tightened as she followed Willa quickly through the corridors, her mind immediately jumping to Damon Cole. But when they reached the main hall, the messenger waiting there was not anyone Elena recognized. A young man with dust on his clothes and exhaustion written across his face, clearly having traveled a great distance without rest. Gareth stood near the platform, reading a folded letter the messenger had delivered, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he looked up, his pale eyes finding Elena immediately across the hall. What is it? Elena asked, unable to bear the tension any longer. Gareth hesitated only a moment before answering honestly. Damon Cole has been gathering allies among several smaller packs along our eastern border, he said. This letter comes from an old friend within one of those packs, warning me that Damon intends to press his claim on you through force, if diplomacy continues to fail him. A cold weight settled in Elena's chest. Force, she repeated. He means to attack this territory. He means to try, Gareth said, his voice hardening with resolve. Whether he succeeds is another matter entirely. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Elena watched as the castle transformed around her, guards training in the courtyards from dawn until dusk, supplies being gathered and stored, messengers riding out to allied packs seeking support. She felt useless amid all the activity, a bystander in a conflict that existed entirely because of her, and that feeling gnawed at her more than any fear for her own safety. She found Gareth late one evening, standing alone on a high balcony, overlooking the darkened forest, his shoulders tense even in stillness. You should be resting, she said softly, stepping out to join him. So should you, he replied, though a small, tired smile touched his mouth as he glanced at her. Elena moved to stand beside him, looking out at the vast, dark forest stretching toward the mountains. This is happening because of me, she said quietly. All of this, the guards training, the alliances being called in, the fear in everyone's eyes when they think I'm not looking. I brought this danger to your territory. No, Gareth said firmly, turning to face her fully. Damon Cole's ambition brought this danger here, not you. You did not choose to be born carrying this bloodline, any more than your mother chose it for herself. The blame belongs entirely to men who see people as prizes to be won, not to the people they are trying to claim. Elena appreciated his words, though the guilt did not fully lift from her chest. I want to help, she said suddenly. I can't simply sit inside these walls while everyone else prepares to defend a territory that only faces danger because of who I turned out to be. Gareth studied her carefully. What did you have in mind? I don't know yet, Elena admitted. But there must be something. Training, strategy, anything. I refuse to be nothing more than a prize sitting quietly in a castle, waiting to be fought over. Something like admiration flickered across Gareth's face. There is a possibility, he said slowly, though I hesitate to suggest it, given the risks involved. Tell me. If your mother's bloodline truly runs through you, Gareth explained, It is possible that strength has not yet awakened within you, simply because you have never faced circumstances severe enough to call it forward. Some among the older pack members believe such strength only surfaces under great need or great danger. Elena considered this, an uneasy mixture of hope and fear settling in her chest. You're saying I might have some hidden ability, but I won't know until I'm actually in danger. That is the belief, yes, though I cannot promise it is entirely accurate. Bloodlines like this are rare enough that much of what is known about them comes from old stories, rather than certain fact. Then I suppose we will find out together, Elena said, trying to sound braver than she felt. Gareth's expression grew serious. I would rather you never have to find out at all, he said quietly. I would rather this entire conflict resolve itself without ever putting you in danger, severe enough to test that theory. But if it comes to that, Elena pressed, you won't try to keep me hidden away like something fragile, will you? If this territory faces real danger because of me, I want the chance to actually help defend it, not simply hide behind these walls waiting for others to fight on my behalf. Gareth was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with his own protective instincts against the respect he seemed to hold for her determination. I will not promise to put you directly in harm's way, he said finally, but I also will not treat you as though you have no say in your own fate. You have earned that much, at the very least. Elena felt a small measure of relief at those words, grateful that he was not simply dismissing her wishes the way her father always had. The silence between them stretched comfortably after that, both of them looking out over the dark forest, aware that whatever calm remained now was likely borrowed time. Can I ask you something? Elena said eventually, her voice softer now. Of course. Why does this matter so much to you personally? I understand the political danger, the bloodline, the threat Damon Cole poses to your territory. But there's something more in the way you've handled all of this, something that feels less like duty and more like something personal. Gareth turned to look at her fully, his pale eyes catching the moonlight, something vulnerable passing briefly across his usually composed expression. I told you I searched for you for years, he said quietly. I told you it began because of the connection to your mother, a debt of gratitude I felt toward a woman who showed me kindness during the loneliest years of my childhood. Yes, Elena said, waiting. But somewhere during those years of searching, Gareth continued, his voice growing quieter still, I stopped searching, only for Miriam's daughter, and started searching for something else entirely. I could not explain it fully, even to myself. Only that I felt certain, in some part of me I did not fully understand, that finding you mattered beyond simple duty or debt. Elena's heart pounded at the raw honesty in his words. And now that you've found me? She asked softly. Gareth studied her for a long, charged moment before answering. Now that I've found you, he said, I understand it far better than I did before. It was never only about your mother, Elena. It has become about you. The space between them felt impossibly small in that moment, the weight of his words settling over her like something warm and terrifying all at once. Elena did not know what to say, torn between the caution that had kept her guarded since arriving at this castle, and the undeniable pull she felt toward this man, who had shown her nothing but honesty and protection since the moment they met. Before either of them could say anything further, a distant horn sounded from somewhere near the outer walls, sharp and urgent, cutting through the quiet night air. Gareth's entire demeanor shifted instantly, the vulnerability from moments before replaced by immediate, focused alertness. That is the warning signal, he said grimly, already moving toward the balcony doors. Stay close to Nora. I need to see what has triggered it. Elena followed quickly behind him, as they hurried through the castle corridors, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. Whatever fragile peace had settled over Ashcroft territory these past few days had apparently just come to an abrupt and unwelcome end. They reached the courtyard to find guards already gathering, torches lit against the darkness, tense voices calling out reports from the outer walls. A guard captain approached Gareth quickly, his expression grim. Riders approaching from the east, Your Majesty, he reported. Damon Cole's banner among them. They are not attempting to hide their approach. Gareth's jaw tightened, his pale eyes hardening with resolve. How many? Enough to be a serious concern, though not yet an overwhelming force. It appears he intends this as a show of strength rather than a full assault, at least for tonight. Elena stood frozen amid the controlled chaos of the courtyard, watching Gareth transform fully into the Alpha King the moment demanded, issuing orders with calm, decisive authority. Whatever tender moment had passed between them on the balcony felt like it belonged to a different world entirely now, replaced by the harsh reality of the danger closing in around them. "Elena," Gareth said, turning to find her amid the gathering guards, his expression softening only slightly despite the urgency of the moment. "Go with Nora, now. Whatever happens tonight, I need to know you are somewhere safe." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist on staying, on helping in whatever way she could. But the look in Gareth's eyes, fierce and protective, and unwilling to compromise on this particular point, told her clearly that this was not a moment for further debate. She nodded reluctantly, allowing Nora to guide her back toward the castle's inner halls, though she cast one final glance back at Gareth, before disappearing through the doors, watching him stand tall and unshaken amid the gathering storm, preparing to defend his territory, and her, against whatever danger Damon Cole had brought to their doorstep in the darkness of the night. Nora led Elena through the castle's inner corridors, away from the courtyard, into a small sitting room, deep within the heart of the building, where thick stone walls muffled most of the sound from outside. Willa was already there, pacing nervously near the fireplace, her hands twisted together in worry. "What's happening out there?" Willa asked the moment they entered. "Damon Cole has arrived with a force at the eastern gate," Nora said grimly, closing the heavy door behind them. "The Alpha King is handling it. We are to remain here until word comes that it is safe." Elena sat down slowly near the fireplace, her mind racing with worry for Gareth, for the guards facing whatever threat waited beyond the walls, for the entire territory now standing on the edge of conflict because of a bloodline she had not even known she carried until a few short days ago. The waiting felt unbearable, each passing minute stretching longer than the one before it. "Tell me more about the bloodline," Elena said suddenly, needing something to focus on besides the fear tightening her chest. "Agnes mentioned it briefly, and Gareth explained a little more, but I still don't fully understand what it actually means, or what I'm supposed to do with it." Nora exchanged a glance with Willa, before answering carefully. "The full truth is not something many people alive today understand completely," she admitted. "Much of what is known comes from records kept in the old library, documents written centuries ago, when the founding families of this territory first settled here." "Do those records still exist?" Elena asked. "They do," Nora said. "Locked away in the private archive beneath the library, accessible only with the Alpha King's permission. Miriam used to study those records herself, back when she still lived here. I remember seeing her there many times, late into the evening, poring over old texts." Elena felt a spark of determination cut through her fear. "I want to see them," she said. "If there are answers down there about what I am, about what happened to my mother, I need to see them myself." "That decision belongs to the Alpha King," Nora said gently, though not unkindly. "Once tonight's danger has passed, I will speak with him on your behalf." The night stretched on slowly, tension thick in the small sitting room as they waited for news. Elena paced, sat, paced again, unable to settle her nerves no matter how hard she tried. It was nearly dawn when a guard finally arrived at the door, delivering word that the immediate threat had passed, that Damon Cole's forces had withdrawn after a tense standoff at the gates, unwilling to risk a full confrontation against Ashcroft's gathered defenses. Relief flooded through Elena, quickly followed by exhaustion so heavy it nearly buckled her knees. She found Gareth a short while later in the grand hall, still dressed for battle though the immediate danger had passed, deep circles of fatigue shadowing his pale eyes. "You're safe," Elena said, relief evident in her voice, as she crossed the hall toward him. "For tonight," Gareth said grimly, though something in his expression softened at the sight of her. "Damon withdrew, but this was only a test, Elena. A show of force, meant to gauge our defenses and our resolve. He will return, likely with a larger force, once he believes the timing suits him better." "Then we need answers," Elena said firmly, remembering her earlier conversation with Nora. "I want to see the archive beneath the library. If there is anything down there that can help us understand what I truly am, what this bloodline is capable of, I need to know it now, before Damon Cole returns with a force we cannot hold back." Gareth studied her for a long moment, exhaustion warring with the protective instinct Elena had come to recognize so clearly in him. Finally he nodded. "Come with me," he said. "It is time you saw the truth for yourself." He led her down a narrow staircase, hidden behind a section of bookshelves in the library, descending into a cool, dimly lit chamber, lined with ancient scrolls and leather-bound books, far older than anything Elena had seen elsewhere in the castle. Dust hung faintly in the still air, and the silence felt heavy with the weight of centuries. "This is where the founding records are kept," Gareth explained, lighting several lanterns as they walked deeper into the chamber. "Only the ruling family, and those they trust completely, have ever been permitted down here." Elena ran her fingers gently along the spines of old books, feeling a strange reverence settle over her. Somewhere in this room, her mother had once searched for the same answers Elena now desperately needed. Gareth guided her toward a specific shelf, pulling down a thick, worn book bound in dark leather, its pages yellowed with age. "This contains the oldest records of the founding bloodline," he said, setting it carefully on a wooden table between them. "According to these accounts, the first rulers of this territory were said to carry a connection to the land itself, a strength that surfaced most strongly in moments of great danger, allowing them to protect their people when ordinary strength was not enough." Elena leaned over the book as Gareth turned the fragile pages carefully, revealing detailed illustrations and careful handwriting, describing wolves whose eyes were said to shift color entirely during moments of extreme need, whose strength could match or exceed even the most powerful alpha of their time. "Did my mother ever show any of these signs?" Elena asked quietly. "Not that I witnessed personally," Gareth admitted, "though I was young when she lived here, and such abilities, according to these records, often remain dormant unless triggered by genuine necessity. It is possible she lived her entire life here without ever facing a moment severe enough to awaken it." Elena studied the illustrations carefully, feeling an odd, unfamiliar pull somewhere deep inside her chest, as though some part of her recognized what she was looking at, even though her mind held no memory of it at all. "What happens," she asked slowly, "if this strength awakens in someone who doesn't know how to control it?" Gareth's expression grew serious. "The records suggest it can be overwhelming. At first," he said. "Difficult to manage without guidance. That is part of why my father feared your mother's bloodline so deeply. An uncontrolled strength of that magnitude, in the wrong circumstances, could pose a danger not only to enemies, but potentially to the person carrying it as well." A chill ran through Elena at those words, though her determination did not waver. "Then I need to learn how to control it, before it has any chance to surface uncontrolled," she said firmly. "If Damon Cole returns with a larger force, I refuse to simply stand by, hoping some inherited strength might awaken at the right moment, without any preparation at all." Gareth studied her with something like fierce respect. "There may be a way to begin preparing you," he said slowly. "Controlled exercises, meant to help those with dormant bloodlines gradually learn to recognize and manage the sensations before they escalate into something overwhelming. It would not guarantee your strength awakens fully, or that you would be ready to use it in true danger, but it is a place to begin." "Then let's begin," Elena said without hesitation. Over the following days, between preparations for Damon Cole's anticipated return, Gareth carved out time each afternoon to guide Elena through careful exercises meant to help her sense the dormant strength Agnes and the old records both spoke of. At first, nothing happened beyond simple frustration. Elena feeling foolish, standing in a quiet training room, trying to summon something she could not even properly define. But on the fourth day, something shifted. Gareth had been demonstrating a defensive stance, his movements sharp and precise, despite his exhaustion from managing the territory's growing tension. Elena watched closely, trying to mimic the movement, when a sudden wave of dizziness swept through her, followed by a strange, tingling warmth that spread outward from her chest into her limbs. "Gareth," she said, her voice unsteady, "something is happening." He turned immediately, his pale eyes widening slightly, as he took in the faint golden shimmer, beginning to gather around her hands, subtle, but unmistakable. "Stay calm," he said gently, moving closer, though he kept enough distance to give her room. "Breathe slowly. Do not fight it, and do not force it either. Simply notice it." Elena focused on her breathing, trying to steady the sudden rush of sensation flooding through her body. The golden shimmer grew slightly brighter for a moment, before fading gradually, leaving her breathless and shaking, though something inside her felt fundamentally different than it had only moments before, as though a door long sealed shut had finally creaked open, even if only slightly. "That was real," she said, staring at her own hands in disbelief. "Wasn't it? That wasn't my imagination." "It was real," Gareth confirmed, something like wonder mixing with concern in his expression. "The bloodline is there, Elena, exactly as the old records described. It is only beginning to stir, but it is there." Elena felt a complicated rush of emotions, fear and excitement, and a strange, fierce determination all tangled together. Whatever waited for her in the days ahead, whatever danger Damon Cole intended to bring back to Ashcroft Territory's doorstep, she was no longer facing it as merely a helpless prize to be fought over. Something ancient and powerful lived within her, inherited from a mother she barely remembered, and for the first time since arriving at this castle, Elena felt something beyond fear when she considered the battles that likely still waited ahead. She felt, for the first time in a very long while, something close to hope. A week after that first small awakening, a guard arrived at the castle gates, escorting an unexpected visitor, someone Elena never imagined would willingly step foot inside Ashcroft Territory. She was in the courtyard practicing the breathing exercises Gareth had taught her when Willa came rushing toward her, breathless. "Elena," Willa said urgently, "your father is here." Elena's entire body went rigid with shock. "That's impossible. Why would he come here?" "I don't know," Willa admitted, "but he's asking to see you. Nora is with him now in the receiving hall." Elena's heart pounded as she made her way toward the receiving hall, a tangle of emotions rising inside her that she did not fully know how to process. Anger, certainly, still raw from the memory of being traded away without her consent, but also, despite everything, a small and unwelcome flicker of hope that perhaps her father had come to apologize, to explain himself, to somehow make right what he had done. Edward Hart stood near the tall windows of the receiving hall, looking smaller and more worn than Elena remembered, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting sleepless nights. He turned when she entered, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Elena," he said finally, his voice rough, "you look well." "What are you doing here?" Elena asked, her voice cold, despite the storm of emotions beneath it. Edward glanced nervously toward Nora, who stood near the door, before returning his attention to his daughter. "I needed to see you," he said, "to make certain you were being treated fairly." "A little late for that concern, don't you think?" Elena said sharply. "You signed me away without asking a single question about how I would be treated." Edward flinched, guilt evident in his expression, though something else lingered beneath it, something Elena could not quite identify. "There are things I need to tell you," he said quietly, "things I should have told you long ago." Before Elena could respond, the doors opened again, and Gareth entered, his expression immediately tightening at the sight of Edward Hart standing in his receiving hall. "Edward," he said, his tone carefully controlled, though tension radiated from every line of his posture. "This is an unexpected visit." "Your Majesty," Edward said, bowing slightly, though his hands remained clenched at his sides. "I apologize for arriving without proper notice. I needed to speak with my daughter, and with you, about a matter of great importance." "Speak then," Gareth said, moving to stand slightly closer to Elena, a protective instinct Elena noticed immediately, and found herself grateful for despite everything. Edward hesitated, glancing between them both, before finally beginning. 18 years ago, he said slowly, when Miriam disappeared, I helped her leave this territory. I loved her, and when I learned certain members of your father's advisors intended to have her quietly removed because of the danger her bloodline represented, I helped her escape before they could act. Elena's breath caught. This was not the confession she had expected. "You knew about the bloodline all along," she said slowly. "You knew, and you never told me." "I was trying to protect you," Edward said, his voice pleading. "I believed if you never knew, you would never become a target the way your mother did. I thought silence was the safest choice I could make for you. And yet, you traded me to the very pack you claimed to be protecting me from," Elena said, anger rising sharply in her voice. "How does that make any sense at all?" Edward's face crumpled slightly, shame evident in every line of his expression. "The debt was real," he said quietly. "My business truly did collapse, and the men who came for payment were not from Ashcroft territory alone. There were representatives present that night from another pack as well, one that had been quietly funding much of my failing business for months, waiting for the right moment to collect. Gareth's expression darkened sharply. "Which pack?" he demanded, though something in his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. Edward's eyes flicked nervously toward the Alpha King before answering. "Damon Cole's pack," he admitted. "They approached me nearly a year ago, offering generous loans I desperately needed at the time." I did not understand until much later that the entire arrangement had been carefully designed, that Damon Cole somehow already knew about Elena's connection to Miriam's bloodline, and had been maneuvering for over a year to eventually gain access to her. Elena felt the room tilt slightly beneath her feet. "You're saying this entire situation, the debt, the trade, all of it, was orchestrated by Damon Cole from the very beginning?" "I did not fully understand it myself until recently," Edward admitted, his voice breaking with evident regret. "When the collectors arrived that night, I believed I was simply settling a debt with Ashcroft territory. I did not know Damon Cole had specifically arranged matters so that Elena would end up here, believing, I suspect, that the Ashcroft pack's involvement would eventually draw enough attention and conflict to justify his own aggressive claim against this territory, using her as the excuse." Gareth's jaw tightened with barely restrained anger. "He used your daughter, and this entire situation, as a calculated move to justify war against my territory," he said grimly. "A war he intends to use as cover for claiming Elena's bloodline for himself." Edward nodded miserably. "I only learned the full truth a few days ago, from a contact who still owed me a favor. I came here immediately, hoping I was not already too late to warn you both." Elena stared at her father, a storm of conflicting emotions raging inside her. Part of her wanted to forgive him instantly, understanding now that his actions, however poorly executed, had been rooted in an attempt to protect her mother's memory, and, in his own misguided way, Elena herself. But another part of her remained furious, unable to forget that his silence and poor decisions had placed her directly in the path of a danger he claimed he wanted to prevent. "You should have told me the truth from the very beginning," Elena said finally, her voice quieter now, though the anger had not fully faded. "All of it. About my mother, about the bloodline, about everything. Instead, I had to learn it all from strangers, in a castle I never wanted to be traded to in the first place." "I know," Edward said softly. "I know, and I am sorry, more than I can properly express. I made choices out of fear, believing silence would keep you safe. I understand now how badly that fear failed you." Gareth stepped forward, his expression shifting from anger toward something more focused and strategic. "This information changes everything," he said. "If Damon Cole orchestrated this entire situation specifically to manufacture a justification for war, then his forces are likely already prepared for a larger assault, far sooner than we anticipated." "What do we do?" Elena asked, her mind racing to catch up with the sudden shift in circumstances. "We prepare faster than we planned," Gareth said grimly, "and we make certain Damon Cole understands clearly that whatever justification he believes he has manufactured will not succeed. Edward," he added, turning to Elena's father, "if you have any further information about his plans, anything at all, I need to know it now." Edward nodded quickly. "My contact mentioned Damon has been gathering forces along the eastern border for the past 2 weeks, far more than the show of strength you witnessed recently. He intends a full assault, timed to coincide with a diplomatic gathering happening in 3 days' time, when he believes your territory's guard will be spread thin, managing visiting delegates." Gareth's expression turned grim with calculation. "Then we have 3 days to prepare for a battle we did not expect to face so soon," he said. He turned to Elena, something steady and resolute settling into his pale eyes. "Are you ready?" Elena thought of the golden warmth that had flickered briefly around her hands during their training, still fragile, still uncertain, but undeniably real. She thought of her mother, forced to flee this same territory 18 years ago rather than face the danger her bloodline represented. She thought of Damon Cole's cold, calculating smile in the hallway, and the casual way he spoke of her as though she were nothing more than a prize to be claimed. "I have to be," Elena said firmly. "Whatever this bloodline is capable of, whatever strength lives inside me, I refuse to run the way my mother was forced to." I would rather stand and fight for this territory, and for the people who have shown me more genuine care in the past 2 weeks than I received in years back home. Edward looked at his daughter, with something like surprised pride, mixed with lingering guilt. Your mother would be proud of you, he said quietly. I only wish I had trusted you with the truth sooner, so that you would not be facing this danger so unprepared. We will make certain she is prepared, Gareth said firmly, placing a steady hand briefly on Elena's shoulder, an unspoken promise passing between them. 3 days is not much time, but it is enough, if we use it wisely. As the three of them began discussing preparations in earnest, Elena felt the fear that had gripped her chest since her father's unexpected arrival begin to settle into something steadier, something closer to resolve. She no longer felt like a helpless piece being traded and fought over by powerful men who saw her only as a prize. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Elena felt like someone with genuine power of her own, standing ready to fight for the life and the people she had unexpectedly come to care for within the walls of Ashcroft territory. The 3 days that followed passed in a blur of preparation, each hour feeling both impossibly long and far too short for everything that needed to be done. Gareth worked tirelessly alongside his guard captains, reinforcing the castle's defenses and coordinating with allied packs willing to send support on short notice. Elena spent every spare moment training, pushing herself to better understand and control the strength stirring inside her, though it remained frustratingly unpredictable, surfacing in brief flashes before fading again just as quickly. Edward remained at the castle throughout the preparations, no longer treated as an outsider but not fully trusted either, occupying an uncertain space between guest and prisoner. Elena found herself speaking with him more over those 3 days than she had in years, slowly, cautiously rebuilding fragments of a relationship that had been badly damaged by his choices, though the wound of his betrayal had not fully healed, and likely never would completely. Do you remember anything else about her? Elena asked him on the second evening, sitting across from her father in a quiet corner of the castle library, surrounded by the same ancient books that held records of her mother's bloodline. About my mother, I mean. Anything at all? Edward was quiet for a long moment, memories clearly weighing heavily on him. She was braver than anyone I ever knew, he said finally. Braver than I have ever managed to be, certainly. When she learned what certain advisors intended for her, she did not simply run in fear. She insisted on taking precautions first, hiding certain records, protecting people she cared about within the castle before she agreed to leave. What kind of records? Elena asked, curiosity sparking immediately. Edward frowned slightly, trying to recall details buried under nearly 2 decades of silence. I don't fully remember, he admitted. Something about ensuring the bloodline's true nature could never be fully erased or hidden by those who feared it. She mentioned hiding something important, somewhere within this castle, though she never told me exactly where, likely to protect me from the danger of knowing too much myself. Elena filed this information away carefully, wondering if perhaps Agnes might know more about whatever her mother had hidden all those years ago. But with Damon Cole's assault looming closer with each passing hour, there was little time to chase down old mysteries that might have no bearing on the immediate danger facing them. On the morning of the 3rd day, word arrived that Damon Cole's forces had been spotted moving toward Ashcroft territory's eastern border, far larger than the show of strength from weeks earlier. The castle's atmosphere shifted immediately, tension coiling tightly through every corridor, as guards took their positions, and final preparations were rushed into place. Gareth found Elena in the training room, practicing the breathing exercises meant to help her access her bloodline's strength more reliably. He watched silently for a moment before speaking. It's time, he said quietly. Damon's forces will reach the eastern gate within the hour. Elena turned to face him, steadying her nerves as best she could. I'm ready, she said, though her voice trembled slightly despite her best efforts to sound confident. You do not have to fight directly, Gareth said gently, moving closer. There are other ways you could help, positioned safely within the castle, assisting with strategy or supporting the wounded, if it comes to that. No, Elena said firmly, shaking her head. I told you before, I refuse to hide behind these walls while others fight a battle that exists because of who I am. If my strength can genuinely help defend this territory, then I need to be there, using it, not hiding from it. Gareth studied her for a long moment, clearly torn between his protective instincts and the respect he held for her determination. Finally, he nodded. "Then we face this together," he said. "But you stay close to me throughout the battle. I will not risk losing you to recklessness, not when we have only begun to understand what your bloodline is truly capable of." Elena agreed, and together they made their way toward the castle's outer walls, where the full weight of the coming battle became immediately clear. Daemon Cole's forces stretched across the eastern fields, far more numerous than anyone had anticipated, their banners flying dark against the pale morning sky. Ashcroft's own defenders stood ready along the walls and gathered in the courtyard below, faces set with grim determination, despite the daunting numbers arrayed against them. Daemon Cole himself rode forward from his assembled forces, stopping just within shouting distance of the main gate, his cold smile visible even from the distance separating them. "Gareth Ashcroft," he called out, his voice carrying easily across the open field. "I offer you one final chance to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. Hand over the girl, and I will withdraw my forces peacefully." "She is not mine to hand over," Gareth called back, his voice steady and commanding, despite the tension radiating through his entire body. "And she has made her own choice, Daemon. She stands with Ashcroft territory, by her own will, not as a prize to be traded between men who see her only as a means to greater power." Daemon's expression darkened with impatience. "Then we will take what we came for," he said coldly, before wheeling his horse back toward his gathered forces, raising his arm in a clear signal for the assault to begin. The battle that followed unfolded with a chaotic intensity that overwhelmed Elena's senses almost immediately. The clash of forces at the gate, the shouts of guards coordinating their defense, the sheer scale of violence breaking out across the field before her. She stayed close to Gareth as promised, her heart pounding as she watched him move with fierce, controlled strength, defending the gate alongside his most trusted guards. It was during a particularly desperate moment, when a group of Daemon's fighters managed to breach a weak point along the eastern wall, threatening to overwhelm the defenders stationed there, that Elena felt something shift powerfully within her chest. Fear for Gareth, for Willa and Nora, and everyone else within these walls who had shown her kindness, surged through her with an intensity she had never experienced before, and the golden warmth that had only flickered briefly during her training suddenly erupted through her entire body with undeniable force. Her vision sharpened, colors becoming impossibly vivid, and she felt strength coursing through her limbs, unlike anything she had ever known. Without fully understanding what she was doing, Elena moved toward the breach in the wall, her presence alone causing several of Daemon's fighters to hesitate, their eyes widening at the golden glow now surrounding her. "Fall back," Elena heard herself commanding, her voice carrying strength she did not recognize as entirely her own, though it felt completely natural, rising from somewhere deep within her chest. To her astonishment, several of the defending guards obeyed instantly, creating space around her as the golden light intensified. What happened next remained slightly blurred in Elena's memory afterward, a surge of protective energy radiating outward from her, pushing back the fighters attempting to breach the wall without causing them serious harm, simply overwhelming them with a force they could not withstand. The breach sealed itself as defenders regrouped, and word of the strange golden light spread quickly across the battlefield, causing visible hesitation among Daemon's remaining forces. The Gareth reached her moments later, his expression a mixture of astonishment and fierce pride. "Elena," he said breathlessly, "that was extraordinary." "I don't fully understand what happened," Elena admitted, her body trembling now that the surge of strength had begun to fade, exhaustion crashing over her in its place. "You protected this territory," Gareth said simply. "Exactly as your mother's bloodline always promised was possible, when the need became great enough." Word of Elena's display spread rapidly among the remaining forces on both sides, and Daemon Cole's confidence visibly wavered as reports reached him of the golden light that had turned back his fighters at the eastern wall. Sensing the shifting tide, and unwilling to risk further losses against a bloodline power he had clearly underestimated, Daemon called for a temporary withdrawal, his forces retreating back toward the eastern border as the sun began climbing higher into the sky. The battlefield fell into an uneasy, exhausted quiet, as Ashcroft's defenders began tending to the wounded and assessing the damage. Elena stood amid the aftermath, her strength completely spent, leaning heavily against Gareth for support, as the adrenaline that had carried her through the fighting finally began to drain away entirely. You saved this territory today, Gareth said quietly, his arms steady around her as they made their way back toward the castle. Whatever doubts you carried about your place here, about what you're truly capable of, I hope today has finally put them to rest. Elena managed a tired, genuine smile despite her exhaustion. I think, she said slowly, I am finally beginning to understand what my mother's bloodline actually means, not as a danger to be feared, but as something worth protecting and worth fighting for. Though Damon Cole's forces had withdrawn for now, both Elena and Gareth understood clearly that this was not the end of the conflict, merely a pause before whatever confrontation still waited ahead. But for the first time since arriving at Ashcroft territory as nothing more than payment for her father's debt, Elena felt genuinely certain of her place within these walls, certain of the strength living inside her, and certain, despite every danger still looming on the horizon, that she had finally found something worth calling home. In the days that followed the battle at the Eastern Wall, Ashcroft territory worked quickly to repair what damage had been done and prepare for whatever came next. Word of Elena's golden strength had spread far beyond the castle walls, reaching allied packs throughout the region, and support began arriving faster than anyone had anticipated, reinforcements eager to stand alongside a territory that had proven itself capable of withstanding Damon Cole's ambitions. Elena spent much of her recovery time with Agnes, determined to understand more fully what her mother had hidden within the castle before her disappearance. Working together with the old woman's guidance, and with careful searching through the archive beneath the library, Elena finally uncovered a hidden compartment behind a loose stone in the old chamber, containing records her mother had painstakingly preserved, detailed accounts of the bloodline's true history, along with a letter addressed simply to whoever might one day find it. The letter, written in her mother's careful handwriting, spoke of hope that someday the fear surrounding the bloodline might finally fade, replaced by understanding and acceptance rather than danger and persecution. Reading her mother's words for the first time brought Elena to tears, a connection to the woman she barely remembered, finally feeling real and tangible in a way it never had before. 3 days after the battle, scouts reported that Damon Cole was gathering his remaining forces once more, though this time, reports suggested growing unrest within his own ranks, several of his allied packs withdrawing their support after witnessing the strength Ashcroft territory had displayed. Rather than risk a larger, more costly assault against a target that had proven far stronger than expected, and facing dwindling support among his own allies, Damon Cole finally sent word requesting formal terms of peace. Gareth called Elena to the Grand Hall when the messenger arrived, wanting her present for a decision that affected her future as much as it affected the entire territory. He offers to withdraw his claim entirely, Gareth explained, reading through the formal terms carefully, in exchange for guaranteed neutrality between our territories going forward, along with formal acknowledgement that any further aggression toward Ashcroft, or toward you specifically, would be considered a direct act of war against every allied pack now standing with us. Do you trust him to honor those terms? Elena asked carefully. Not entirely, Gareth admitted, but with his support crumbling among his own allies, and with your bloodline now fully proven and publicly acknowledged, I believe he understands clearly that further conflict would cost him far more than he stands to gain. For now, at least, I believe these terms offer genuine peace, even if we remain cautious going forward. Elena considered the terms carefully, weighing everything she had learned over the past several weeks, the danger, the fear, but also the strength she had discovered within herself, and the unexpected sense of belonging she had found within Ashcroft territory's walls. Accept the terms, she said finally, but make certain he understands clearly that I am done being treated as a prize to be fought over. Whatever peace we build going forward, it needs to be built on genuine respect, not simply fear of what might happen if he crosses us again. Gareth nodded, clearly proud of the strength and clarity in her decision. The formal peace was signed within the week, bringing an uneasy but genuine end to the immediate danger that had shadowed Elena since her arrival at Ashcroft territory. With the threat of war finally lifted, Elena found herself facing a quieter, though no less significant question about what her life within Ashcroft territory would truly become going forward. Her father remained at the castle for several more weeks, slowly working to rebuild whatever fragments of trust remained between them, though Elena understood their relationship would likely never fully return to what it once was, forever changed by the choices he had made and the truths he had kept hidden for so long. It was on a quiet evening, several weeks after the peace had been formally established, that Gareth found Elena once again in the castle gardens, sitting near the same fountain where Willa had first introduced herself all those weeks earlier. The gardens looked different now in the fading evening light, softer somehow, though Elena understood that the real difference was not in the gardens themselves, but in how completely her own life had transformed since she first arrived here. "May I join you?" Gareth asked, and Elena nodded, making room on the stone bench beside her. "I've been thinking," Elena said quietly, watching the water trickle gently from the fountain, "about everything that has happened since I arrived here. It feels strange, looking back at the woman who stepped out of that car weeks ago, so afraid, so certain she had lost everything that mattered in her life." "And now?" Gareth asked gently. Elena considered the question carefully before answering. "Now I understand that losing my old life wasn't the ending I believed it to be that first night," she said. "It was actually the beginning of finally understanding who I truly am, where I come from, and what I am genuinely capable of, things I might never have discovered if my father hadn't made the choices he did, however painful and difficult that path turned out to be." Gareth reached over, taking her hand gently in his own, and Elena did not pull away. "I meant what I told you weeks ago," he said quietly. "This began as a search connected to your mother, to a debt of gratitude I carried for her kindness. But somewhere along the way, it became something else entirely, something that has nothing to do with debts or bloodlines or old promises." "I know," Elena said softly, meeting his pale eyes directly. "I feel it too, if I'm being honest with myself. Somewhere between arriving here terrified and fighting alongside you at that wall, I stopped seeing you as simply the powerful stranger who bought my father's debt, and started seeing you as someone I genuinely trust, someone I have come to care for deeply." Gareth's expression softened into something warm and unguarded, an expression Elena had rarely seen from the composed Alpha King who ruled this entire territory. "Elena Hart," he said quietly, "you arrived at Ashcroft territory as payment for a debt neither of us truly understood at the time. But I want you to know, clearly and completely, that whatever happens between us going forward, it will only ever be because you choose it freely, for yourself, never because of any debt, any bloodline, or any arrangement made without your consent." "I know that," Elena said, a genuine smile finally breaking across her face. "And for what it's worth, I choose this. I choose you, not because of any debt my father owed, but because of who you have shown yourself to be over these past several weeks. Someone who valued my consent and my strength from the very beginning, even when the easier path would have been to simply treat me as property that had been rightfully claimed." Gareth's smile matched her own, something deeply relieved and genuinely happy settling into his features. "Then perhaps," he said softly, "we should begin building something new together, something that has nothing to do with the circumstances that first brought you here, and everything to do with the future we choose to build from this point forward." As the sun set fully behind the mountains surrounding Ashcroft territory, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and gentle purple, Elena felt something settle peacefully within her chest for the first time since that terrible night when her father's debt had first threatened to consume everything she once knew. She had arrived here as an object traded away to settle a debt she never agreed to, carrying nothing but a small bag and a shattered sense of who she once believed herself to be. Now, sitting in these quiet gardens beside a man who had spent years searching for her without even fully understanding why, having discovered a hidden strength inherited from a mother whose memory she was only now beginning to truly understand, Elena finally recognized that she was no longer the frightened girl who had stepped out of that car weeks earlier. She had become someone stronger, someone who had chosen, freely and completely, exactly where she belonged, and exactly who she wanted standing beside her, as she stepped into whatever future still waited ahead. The debt that had once threatened to define her entire existence had long since been settled, forgotten beneath everything far more meaningful that had grown in its place. And as Gareth gently squeezed her hand beneath the darkening evening sky, Elena understood, with a certainty she had never felt before, that she had finally, truly, found her way home.